Hi everyone, this is meteorologist Joel Curtis with your Alaska Weather TV show. Starting out with our hazardous weather in southwest Alaska, we have a winter weather advisory for the Yukon Delta for snow and blowing snow, a blizzard warning for the Kuskokwim Delta area including Nunivak Island, and that will be going on until around midnight tonight. We also have a blizzard warning for St. Paul Island and Unalaska, and those are again going to last some time for 11 p.m. for the Eastern Aleutians and to 6 p.m. tomorrow for the Pribilofs. Then next we have some winter weather advisory for the Bering Strait coast and St. Lawrence Island, and that will be lasting until 3 p.m. tomorrow. Also, we have wind chill warnings all the way from Point Hope almost to Kaktovik along the northern sections of the Brooks Range. And that will be going on until 6 p.m. tomorrow. So lots of weather to talk about here. First of all, a really interesting weather day to a meteorologist. We have a satellite image shows a low pressure system just southeast of St. Paul, and another couple of systems that are forming up in the Gulf of Alaska. Now we'll run the satellite loop, and you can see how these systems seem to be organizing a little bit into surface low centers, and lots of shower activity out there, including some thunderstorms. So for today's weather, what we've got is thunderstorms in the Gulf of Alaska, particularly on the east side of a 984 millibar low. We also have that secondary low in Bristol Bay, and that'll be swinging down past Kodiak Island. Also where we have that trough to the southwest of the main low, that another low pressure system is forming up there. Plus we have a couple of minor troughs moving across the northern sections for some light snow and some blowing snow up in there. But the main thing is that blizzard warning that we have in the Kuskokwim Delta and the Pribilofs and the Eastern Aleutians. Also a slug of warm air moving up into the western Bering Sea. For tonight, that weather system in the western Bering Sea organizes even better to a 979 millibar low. The frontal system is moving into the Bering Sea, and you can see that there's some heavy rain behind the warm air. Snow out ahead of it. Snow showers in the eastern Bering Sea, including the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Also a little bit of light snow over the central interior, mainly to the north of the Alaska Range. And then we still have that complex of low pressure systems in the Gulf of Alaska and thunderstorms associated with that system because there's very cold air aloft over warm air at the surface. For Wednesday's weather, that system is still organized 979 millibars into far eastern Russia, a cold front in behind that system with warm air out ahead of it. Also, we have a surface trough in the northeastern interior, and that low still persists to 986 millibars off the Panhandle, and lots of heavy showers associated with that system. For Thursday's weather, that low hangs out near the Gulf of Anadyr, hit as deep into 967 millibars, and now the frontal system is well organized and moving up to the Bering Strait and all along the west coast of Alaska, including lots of cold air that's moved across the Bering Sea for snow showers. Also, we have snow out ahead of that system all the way into south central Alaska, some heavy rain south of the Alaska Peninsula, and then that old low has now weakened to 984 millibars near Haida Gwaii. There's still some showers out over the Gulf and some areas of the Panhandle. So for our low temperatures Wednesday morning, we're looking at 26 for Skagway, 31 for Juneau, up to 37 at Ketchikan, and 35 for Sitka. As we move over to Yakutat, plus 29, -1 for Golconda, but 16 for Valdez, 10 for Anchorage, 6 for Kenai, 18 for Homer, 6 for Talkeetna, and up to 27 degrees for Kodiak Island. For the North Slope, well into the below zero digits there, -32 for Dead Horse, all the way up to -20 for Point Hope, -22 for Utiagavik. As you get down to Kotzebue, -22, Point Hope, -22, -17 for St. Lawrence Island, and -17 for Nome. And then as we get down to the Kuskokwim, the Yukon Delta, -20. Also for Fairbanks, -14. And for the Yukon Flats, down to -17 degrees. For our low temperatures Wednesday morning, for Southwest, you can see in the 20s as you go out to the Aleutians, all the way up to 33 with that warm air at Shimia, but 13 for the Pribilofs, and still in the minus teens for southwestern Alaska. Then as we look at our high temperatures Wednesday afternoon, for the Panhandle, well into the 30s, up to 40 at Ketchikan, 38 for Yakutat, plus 15 for Golconda, 29 for Valdez, 25 for Talkeetna, 20 for Anchorage, plus 23 for Kenai, and 28 for Homer, and up to 33 degrees for Kodiak Island. Then for our high temperatures Wednesday afternoon, in the minus teens all along the North Slope, get down to -3 as you get into the eastern Brooks Range, -6 in the Yukon Flats for Fort Yukon, +5 for Fairbanks, and then +9 as you get down to the Alaska Range, -13 for Kotzebue, -3 for Nome, and -6 for St. Lawrence Island. Then for our high temperatures Wednesday afternoon for the Southwest, in the 20s, all the way up to 40 as you get out to the Aleutians with all that warm air out ahead of that system. 24 for the Pribilofs, but still in the negative single digits for southwestern Alaska. And then for our low temperatures Thursday morning for the Panhandle, we also have 28 for Skagway, 30 for Juneau, 36 for Sitka, 37 for Ketchikan, 25 as you get over to Yakutat, -7 for Golconda. Also 14 for Valdez, 15 for Homer, 0 for Kenai under some clearing skies, +8 for Anchorage, 2 for Talkeetna, and then up to 22 degrees over at Kodiak. For the North Slope, again, fairly cold temperatures with -31 for Dead Horse, all the way up to -17 at Point Hope, -24 for Kotzebue, -14 for Nome, -21 in the Yukon Flats area, -18 for Fairbanks. As you get down to McGrath, -21, and for the Yukon Delta, -22, -10 for St. Lawrence Island. And then for the Southwest Alaska, as we start to go out the peninsula, in the teens, up to the 20s as you get into the eastern Aleutians, especially 28 for Dutch Harbor, also 32 for Adak, 25 for Shimia, and 18 for the Pribilofs, and then minus teens again for southwestern Alaska, for especially the Yukon, for the Kuskokwim Delta area. Then for our high temperatures Thursday afternoon, temperatures ranging, actually getting into the 40s for southeast Alaska, except for 36 at Skagway, 37 for Yakutat, 11 for Golconda, 27 for Valdez, 31 for Homer, 17 for Kenai, 17 for Anchorage, up to 20 for Talkeetna, and 31 degrees for Kodiak. Then for our high temperatures Thursday afternoon along the North Slope, minus teens. As we get down to the Yukon Flats, -7, 0 for Kotzebue, +12 for Nome, 7 for Fairbanks, 16 as you get down to the Alaska Range, and 16 also for the Yukon Delta, and 15 for St. Lawrence Island. For southwestern Alaska, start seeing the 30s as you go out the Alaska Peninsula, 36 for the Pribilofs, but then you get to 40 for the eastern Aleutians, 39 for Adak, and 35 for Shimia. And now you can see some real warming in southwestern Alaska, up to 25 for Nunivak Island and 14 for Bethel. And then recap on our hazardous weather. We have wind chill advisories, along the northern areas of the Brooks Range, also over into northwestern Alaska, including Ambler and Point Hope. Winter weather advisory for the Bering Strait coast and St. Lawrence Island. Also winter weather advisory for Hooper Bay and that area right along over to Cape Romanzoff. Blizzard warning for Bethel. And then for tonight, we also have a blizzard warning for St. Paul, also for Unalaska Island. And that winter weather is going to stay with us until that warm air gets over into the eastern Bering Sea. So that's it, a wrap up for our Alaska weather tonight. And thanks again for tuning in for our public section here.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And now for your aviation weather. Starting out with our flying conditions Wednesday morning, we have an area of IFR moving into the western Aleutians, also into Bristol Bay, over the Alaska Range, up in the upper Yukon River, some in the eastern Alaska Range, and the mountainous areas of southeast Alaska on the east side. On Wednesday afternoon, that area of IFR is moving more into the central Bering Sea, some marginal VFR all the way to the Pribilofs and up to the Alaska Peninsula. Also over the central region, including some of the North Slope and down to the Alaska Range, as well as marginal VFR conditions in southeast Alaska. On Thursday morning, the very strong front is moving into the eastern Bering Sea. It's over St. Matthew Island and IFR down to the Pribilofs to the central Aleutians. Also, we have a slight area of IFR conditions on the eastern side of the Alaska Range near the Alcan. Also, a little bit of marginal VFR of the Brooks Range, as well as marginal VFR into the Panhandle, and some IFR conditions in the northern Panhandle and the far eastern Panhandle. For Thursday afternoon, the front moves up to the west coast, including Norton Sound all the way down through Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, marginal VFR over the entire Bering Sea, and some areas of marginal VFR over the Panhandle. Our pass conditions on Wednesday: Anaktuvik Pass, marginal VFR. Adigan Pass, marginal VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, IFR becoming VFR. For Rainy Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Windy Pass, IFR, going to marginal VFR. Isabel Pass, marginal VFR all day. Mentasta Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Tanhita Pass, marginal VFR becoming VFR. Portage Pass, VFR all day. And Chilkoot and White Pass, IFR in the morning becoming marginal VFR in the afternoon. For freezing levels on Wednesday morning, again in the wintertime, most of our freezing levels are at the surface for almost the entire state. A little bit of freezing level rising up in the Panhandle. And then there's a slug of warm air out ahead of the next weather system that's gone into the western Aleutians. For icing on Wednesday, a large area of considerable moderate surface to 10,000 feet in the western Bering Sea. Also an area in the central Aleutians extending between 2,000 feet and 10,000 feet for considerable moderate. Some of the isolated moderate in the Bering Sea below 8,000 feet and on up into the Alaska Range below 4,000 feet, as well as out from the Alaska Peninsula. And then we have around that low pressure system off the coast of the Panhandle, we have below 10,000 feet, considerable moderate extending up on into the Panhandle. For our jet stream on Wednesday, we've got a very strong upper ridge moving through, 150 knots southwesterlies on the west side of the ridge, and then northerlies come around all along the west coast and up to 145 knot northerlies over the Alaska Peninsula. In the meantime, on the other side of a big upper trough, we have 120 knot southwesterlies just short of the Panhandle into Canada. For our 9,000 foot winds on Wednesday, we have circulation up by the North Slope. Along the west coast, northerlies 20, extending up to 40 knots, and then when you get down to the Alaska Peninsula, it's about 55 knots or so. On the far western Bering Sea, southwesterlies up to 80 knots, and then off that low, off the Panhandle, got up to 35 to about 45 knots or so through Dixon Entrance. And then for our 3,000-foot winds on Wednesday, you can see that southerlies getting into almost to the central Bering Sea, up to 75 knots as you get out to the western Aleutians, 45 knots over the central Aleutians. Northerlies, 30 to 40 knots as you come down the west coast, 45 knots over the Alaska Peninsula, and in the area of Sitgak Island, about 20 knots or so over south central. And then you can see that circulation around the low off the Panhandle, 35 to 40 knots. For our turbulence on Wednesday, we've got considerable moderate, below 4,000 feet up to below 6,000 feet along the west coast and St. Matthew Island. Below 6,000 feet, considerable moderate all across the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. And then we have some isolated areas of below 4,000 feet as you get over along the Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle. So that our turbulence on Wednesday is going to be generally outflow winds on the Gulf side.
What we're looking at is a legacy of the Ice Age. Permafrost and methane is a time machine. So what we're going to do is walk back in time. We're going to see old carbon, old bones, old environments, and none of those are in equilibrium with today's climate, so that's the problem. That world doesn't exist anymore, and it hasn't for 10,000 years. It was nicely and very delicately separated from this modern warmer climate by about this much moss. And when that moss goes away, whether for fire or for human disturbance or for warming, then all hell breaks loose.
Permafrost. It's maybe the part of the cryosphere that's most out of sight and mind. It's fascinating how it formed in the first place and how it got loaded with so much carbon. In a minute, we'll go back underground with Matthew Sturm from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. But first, let's meet Peter Griffith, NASA's project manager for the Above campaign, which supports more than 70 science projects studying forest and tundra vegetation, wildfires, animals like birds, caribou, and Dall sheep, methane emissions from expanding northern lakes, and the impacts of climate change on people in Alaska, Canada, and around the world. Many of those projects have some direct connection to permafrost.
Permafrost is the hidden cryosphere. It's the permanently frozen soil that surrounds the Arctic, all across Alaska, northern Canada, and then across Eurasia. The ground has been frozen during the ice ages.
During the ice ages, there was not enough snowfall in the drier regions of Alaska and Canada to form glaciers there, so the land was suitable for vegetation.
What happened is that over thousands and thousands of years, all of that plant material got compacted and frozen every winter and buried and pushed down, so that today there's 300 feet deep of frozen water and dead plants and some pieces of dead animals too. Sometimes you find woolly mammoths in the permafrost. But most of it, of the organic matter as we call it in the permafrost, is frozen plant material.
Some of that plant material is now thawing and decaying, releasing its ancient carbon into the atmosphere, sometimes in the form of methane gas bubbling out of expanding northern lakes.
We started this field campaign because the Arctic is the part of the planet that is warming first and fastest. And there are consequences to this for permafrost. So during the Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment, we're studying permafrost with people on the ground, from aircraft flying over the region, and also from satellites in space.
Another way to understand the permafrost is to take a walk below ground with Matthew Sturm and into the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permafrost tunnel.
And they've dug this tunnel back into the side of a hill about 200 feet, and it goes sort of sloping down so that by the end of the tunnel, you're about 100 feet underground. And you're surrounded by bones sticking out of the wall from the steppe bison and mastodons that are frozen in it. There's sticks that are 40,000 years old, that you can touch with your hand. There's grass that's still green, that's tens of thousands of years old because it got frozen, right away, and it's never lost the green color.
But as fascinating as it is to see these relics of an ancient era, or to see a tree split in half by thawing soil, or even to light a ball of methane on fire from under winter ice, at the end of the day, Peter and his colleagues want to know just how much organic matter is frozen in that permafrost, and how fast it might be released.
Currently, we think that there is something on the order of 2 to 3 times as much carbon locked up as frozen organic matter in permafrost as there is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So releasing all of that organic carbon from permafrost into the atmosphere would be a real game changer. That would be a tremendous transformation of the planet's atmosphere. Now, the good news is that it would take a very, very long time for that to happen. However, we are warming the planet at a rate now that calls into question how quickly is that changing and what the consequences in the near future and in the far future are going to be.
You're in the middle of a field somewhere in California at 4 a.m. It's sort of surreal in a way because you've put so much time into it for so long, and actually seeing it over there is like, whoa, it's a big deal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And now for your marine forecast, some sea ice notes. From Thursday through the weekend, expect the ice to retreat northward. Also, the north-facing shores could see some ice pulling away from the shore and some water upwelling. For Wednesday's marine forecast, southeast Alaska, 20 to 25 knots on the outside, southeasterlies, seas up to 16 feet, and in the inside waters, generally northerlies in the north sections, 20 knots, seas 4 feet, and then for Clarence Strait, southeast 25, seas 8 feet. For the outside waters on Thursday, northerlies to northeasterlies up to 25 knots, seas up to 15 feet, Cape Suckling easterlies 15 knots, seas 8 feet, and then on the inside, generally offshore, 15 to 25 knots and seas up to 7 feet. For Wednesday's marine forecast, south central, Prince William Sound, northerlies 15 knots, seas 3 feet. On the outside waters, circulation around the low pressure system, 20 all the way up to gale force, 35 knots down by Kennedy Entrance, seas up to 12 feet. For Cook Inlet, northeasterlies starting out 10 knots in the north, but northwesterlies 40 knots and seas up to 10 feet through Kennedy Entrance from Cape Augustine. And then from Thursday's marine forecast, we've got some circulation around the low again, 15 to 25 knots on the outside, seas up to 8 feet, northeasterlies 10, seas 2 feet in Prince William Sound, northeasterlies 10 all the way up to 25 knots as you get down through Cook Inlet, seas as high as 5 feet. For Wednesday's marine forecast for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, northwesterlies up to 40 knots, 45 knots south of Sandpoint, seas up to 19 feet on the Pacific side and 20 feet on the Bering Sea side. And then for Thursday, got a circulation around low up in the Bering, southeasterlies 30 knots, seas 5 feet in Bristol Bay, southwesterlies 40 knots, seas 14 feet north of Coal Bay, and then some circulation around low in the Gulf up to 35 knots and seas 12 feet on the outside waters, 15 knots southerlies for Chillicothe State, seas 3 feet. For the Aleutian Chain, we've got circulation around the approaching weather system, up to 45 knots in the western Aleutian, up to 21 feet. As we get down further east, 25 to all the way to 35 knots and 45 knots south of Unalaska Island, 17 feet on the Pacific side and up to 20 feet on the Bering Sea side. And then on Thursday, things come around to more westerly, storm force 50 knots in the western Aleutians, seas up to 30 feet, and then 35 to 45 knots in the central and eastern Aleutians, westerlies, seas up to 28 feet on the Bering side and 18 feet on the Pacific side. For the west coast on Wednesday, we've got northwesterlies ranging 20 to 35 knots or so, seas up to 13 feet south of St. Matthew, 12 feet near the Pribilofs. And then for Thursday's forecast, the wind's really ramping up to storm force 50 knots as you get up over the ice, 40 to 45 knots for south of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, seas up to 23 feet down there. For the Arctic coastline, northeasterlies 10 to 15 knots as you get down to Point Hope, northerlies 20 all the way up to 30 knots as you get down to through Bering Strait. And Thursday's marine forecast, easterlies 25 to 30 knots, setting up some wind chill over the ice. 35 all the way up to storm force 50 knots on the west side. Southeasterlies 50 knots off of Wales and Nome, and up to 35 knots off of Point Hope. So a recap of tonight's weather. Complex low pressure system in the Gulf, thunderstorms in that system there, snow showers just about everywhere in the Gulf and Alaska Peninsula, snow out ahead of the system out west. For Wednesday's weather, that circulation still maintained in the Gulf, heavy snow showers out in the Gulf, snow showers in the Panhandle, some light snow into the central interior. Also, that system still deepening 970 millibars as it goes up into northeastern Russia. Warm front ahead of it with snow, some heavy rain ahead of the cold front south and snow showers. And then finally Thursday's weather, that 967 millibar in the Gulf of Anadyr and 984 off of Haida Gwaii.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.